There were posters all over town, and everyone had wondered what was happening this year on Fern Island. Fern Island was something of a tourist attraction in Hamburg. It was a foggy island that sat in the middle of Lake Crawford, connected to the mainland by a wooden bridge that was built in the 1800s and had been maintained ever since. The island was covered in a light mist year-round, becoming thicker in the colder months, and it was often the destination for ghost tours or haunted houses during the fall. Not a year went by that someone didn't trot out the fact that it was a place they had taken from the Sorota Indians, and that the spirits of many who died there died before their time and were likely to linger. "So what is it this year?" Jazzy asked as Mary brought one of the flyers in close. Her eyesight was terrible, even with the glasses, and in order to read much, she usually had to put it right under her nose. "Come see the Barkers' Haunted Carnival. Come to Fern Island the week of Halloween. Sounds like there's some sort of horror carnival coming on Monday night." Reggie grabbed one of them too, reading over the events. Graveyard maze, haunted house, carnival rides, prize alley, and haunted hayride. Sounds like a blast. "Admission's pretty reasonable too," Jazzy said, reading over his shoulder. "We should definitely go." "It'll be packed on opening night," Mark said, leaning over Reggie's other shoulder. "Maybe we should hit it in the middle of the week." "No way," Jazzy said. "We have to hit it before everyone ruins it for us. It starts at sunset. Does anyone have to work on Monday?" "Nope," Mark said. "Funland's closed for the season, and I'm going to start looking for something else." "Same," said Reggie, as he moved up the sidewalk. Mark punched him in the shoulder playfully. "Like you can't just go work for your dad anyway." Reggie blew him off dismissively. "Why would I want to do that? He'd probably shortchange me." "I've got to study for my chem midterm," Mary started, but Jazzy wrapped an arm around her conspiratorially and shut her up. "You can study any old night, Mary. Come on, come with us." Mary looked away, clearly not wanting to skip her studying, but Jazzy put the final nail in the coffin for her productivity. "You come with us to opening night, and we'll go afterwards to that all-night boba place you like so much." "Okay," she said, smiling. "You promise? You always say you will, but you always—" "I promise," Jazzy said. "Trust me, we're going to have a great time." Jasmine, or Jazzy, Mary, Mark, and Reggie had been friends since middle school. Jazzy and Reggie lived on the same street, and had known each other longer than that, and Jazzy had met Mary in her 6th grade math class when she couldn't seem to pass Mr. Sanders' tests. Reggie and Mark had met at football tryouts, and when the two groups had come together, they had proven to be a force to be reckoned with. They had always paired together for projects and hung out almost constantly during their off time. When Reggie had asked Jazzy to be his girlfriend in 11th grade, his infatuation had really only been a surprise to him. They had been afraid it would change the dynamic of the friend group, but nothing really seemed to change. They still spent all their time together, even when Mary got accepted to college and none of them bothered to apply. And Halloween had always been a big hangout time for them, whether it was trick-or-treating well into high school years, watching scary movies on someone's couch. They always came together for the night so they could experience it together. They had been to the ghost tour on Fern Island the year before, and the haunted hayride the year before that, and the island festivities were almost an annual tradition by this point. As Jazzy read over the flyer again, she knew that this year's event would be the best yet. She could just feel it. "I'm not sure how they intend to have a whole carnival there by Monday," Reggie said, putting an arm around Jazzy as they walked. "I haven't seen anyone setting anything up there, and corn mazes don't just spring up over—" But he tapered off as he saw a small crowd gathering up ahead. "What's that up ahead?" Mark said, moving around them as he went to see. "Almost like a crowd waiting for a parade," Mary commented, And when Mark told them to come see this, they all moved up to the edge of the crowd. They were craning over each other's heads, and the people in front were mumbling softly at whatever was moving past. Jazzy hopped up on a concrete planter, and Reggie, a whole head taller, lifted onto his toes to see. Mark had climbed onto a nearby bench, and Mary tried to get every inch of her 5'0" frame as she asked what they were seeing. Jazzy didn't really have any words for what she was seeing, but if this was the fellow running the haunted carnival, then it was certainly boding well. Cars on Main Street had gotten out of the way as a large black carriage, driven by 6 small black horses, had pulled its way silently up the street with reserved steps. It was like a funeral wagon and a gypsy caravan all in one. The whole side was covered in strange symbols and pictures, the curtains drawn on the inside, and the whole thing seeming to drink in the sunlight as it rolled through town. The driver, however, was the real draw. The man was tall and thin. His suit and tail, not to mention his black top hat, made Jazzy think of a mortician. In contrast to his clothes, the man's face was split into a wide grin, and his booming voice seemed to push the crowd back a step as he spoke. He was tossing things into the crowd, and when Reggie picked one out of the air, Jazzy saw it was a metal coin with a skull on the other side. "Come one, come all, to the haunted carnival. Those presenting coins will receive their tickets at half price. The carnival welcomes all who are looking for a haunted experience like no other. So be there opening night, and don't miss the thrills, the chills, and the screams." He repeated it again and again as he rode through the town, and as the crowd followed him, Jazzy and her friends fell in with them. The wheels of the carriage should not have fit between the handrails of the old bridge so easily, but they did. As the wagon rolled towards Fern Island, dark clouds began to build up over it, and the fog became thicker as it touched the strange wagon. It was lost amidst it as it rolled towards the island, and no one seemed to want to follow it. Jazzy had taken a step after it, mesmerized by its promises of thrills and chills, but stopped before she could step into the fog. Seeing it before it was ready would ruin the surprise, and she wanted the full effect when she returned opening night, because she would return. Jazzy would have gone back, even if she had to crawl. "We're going Monday night," she half whispered to her friends as they stood behind her. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." Jazzy looked herself over in the mirror, taking it all in as she turned this way and that. The outfit made her think of a witch, but a stylish witch, and the boots she had bought for tonight helped pull it all together. Reggie would love it, but he loved most everything she wore. Reggie was easy. He liked her, and she liked him, and that was all that mattered. It made a relationship easy. She checked her watch and was aghast to discover that it was nearly 6. She would have to hurry to get ready before sundown, and she grabbed her purse as she made her way downstairs to wait for Reggie. "Where are you heading off to?" her mother asked, as she tried to slip out the door without being noticed. "Just heading to the carnival on Fern Island. It looks wild this year." Jazzy gritted her teeth, expecting a fight. "And have you applied for any colleges yet? Found a job? Gotten your grades up?" Her mother was standing in the door of the kitchen now, glaring at her as she mixed up a bowl of something that would likely become cookies. "I'm working on the last one, but as for the other 2, it's my senior year, Mom. I'm trying to enjoy my last year of freedom before adulthood." Her mother rolled her eyes. "You better enjoy it while it lasts then, because once it's gone, Jazzy. I do wish you would take it a little more seriously. You can't be a child forever." Jazzy worried at her lip, opening the door as her mother went back into the kitchen. "I can sure as hell try," she whispered, fixing her face as she noticed Reggie was waiting for her. He had pulled his old Datsun up onto the curb a little, and as he got out to get the door for her, she saw that Mark and Mary were waiting in the back seat already. The last to arrive, it would seem, she said, climbing in. You okay? Mark asked as Reggie got back in. Fighting with your mom again? Jazzy nodded. Yeah, she thinks I need to take my senior year a little more seriously. My dad, too, Reggie said with a sigh as he took off. He's pissed I haven't started applying for colleges yet. I told him I didn't think I could leave this town just yet. It doesn't feel like it's the right time. Aw, Mark said, his voice full of sarcasm. You mean I might actually get to be a starting running back at Eastmont? Reggie blew out a raspberry. Only if I take a year off, but you better keep my spot warm for me. They bantered as they went, Jazzy still thinking about what her mother had said, but all thoughts of the future were pushed aside as they got to the parking lot and saw Fern Island. Huh, the spirits truly did it all in a weekend, Mark said with a laugh as they came through the fog. They were far from the first ones here. There were already about a dozen people waiting at the head of the bridge when the group arrived, and Jazzy was surprised to see that no one had arrived in costumes of any sort. There were always a few people who insisted on dressing up. Mark had even floated the idea of a group costume, but something had seemed wrong about the idea. This didn't feel like the kind of thing you dressed up for, though she couldn't say why. It felt disrespectful somehow, but that was as close as she could come to explaining it. The fog had been thicker that day than any of them had ever seen it. It clung around Fern Island like a curtain, just waiting to rise on a feature presentation. The dark clouds were gone now, but as the sky darkened, it would have been hard to tell. More people lined up behind them, and it appeared that most of the town had turned out for the carnival. As the sun set, the fog parted, the lights came up, and the assembled were treated to a scene of enchantment. A huge Gothic manor loomed up before them, something the Addams family would have been happy to call home. From the black, peeling siding to the bent weather vane on top, the house oozed creepy. There was a graveyard beside it, a sea of headstones that stretched off into the woods around the house, and beside the manor stood a gaudy neon fair in full swing. The rides ran, the people screamed, and you could hear the sounds of games being played and prizes being won from here. The icing on the cake was a hayfield, complete with tractor, with scarecrows dotting the lush landscape. And at the entrance, poised like a gargoyle, was the barker. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. Step up and experience terror like never before. Jazzy and her friends paid their way, Reggie turning in his coin from the day before, and for a moment they just stood there, trying to decide what to do first. Reggie and I really want to go on the hayride, Jazzy cooed, grabbing his arm and nodding at him. I was hoping to have a look at the fair, Mark said. Maybe win some prizes at the midway. The haunted house looks fun, Mary said, and I kind of want to check out the graveyard, too. Well, Jazzy said, what if we all meet at the fair in, say, a half an hour? Then we can double back and do some of the other stuff, too. They all liked the sound of that, and so they opted for a strategy that had doomed groups for generations. They decided to split the party. Mary stood before the house, just soaking it in for a moment. There was no way this place was just some fabrication. It seemed impossible that it would fit inside the wagon they had seen the other day as it went up the street. The front steps led up to a long, sweeping porch, complete with rockers and little tables with empty drinking glasses covered in cobwebs. The front door was huge and ornate, a knocker shaped like a grinning skull in the middle, and when Mary went to push it opened on its own and expelled a great deal of smoke along with it. It was likely supposed to be very spooky, but Mary couldn't help but laugh a little as she walked through the cloud and into the house. Did it do this for every guest when they opened the door? It must have cost them a fortune in fog liquid for whatever machine they had hidden back there. It got thicker as she went inside, and what she found on the other side was not the set piece from the Addams family she had been expecting. What she found was her parents' living room, complete with the same shag carpet, wood paneling, and ancient furniture that had been there since her grandmother had left it to them. What the hell, Mary thought, as she walked into a near-perfect replica of her family home. Is this some sort of weird, subjective horror housewife kind of thing? She didn't know, but she heard laughing from the area that would be the dining room and went to investigate. Looking at the dining room was like watching one of those old shows from the 50s, complete with black and white filter. Sitting at the table, all dressed like they were out of an episode of Leave It to Beaver, were her parents, her older sister, and her younger brother. Clark was still in his football gear, eating through the slits in his helmet, and Claudia was dressed in a graduation cap and gown, looking a little more normal than Clark as she ate. Her parents were laughing and talking animatedly to them, and as Mary took her seat, nobody seemed to notice. This was a strange sort of haunted house, if it was a haunted house at all. Mary had never seen anything like this, and she was a little concerned that she might be having a fit or something. They all talked to each other, none of them sparing a glance for her, and this was far from something out of Mary's nightmare. This was more like a case of same stuff, different day, as Jazzy would have said. Mary had always felt as if she were an extra in her own life. She was smart, like her sister, but not quite as smart. Claudia was going to Dartmouth, but she had graduated 2 years before with a bunch of scholarships and grants and chances to succeed. Mary's grades were excellent, but she hadn't found it as easy to get the same kind of support that her older sister had gotten. Not to mention, their parents had thrown a college fund behind Claudia, something they had made it very clear that they could not afford to do for Mary. It's just not possible, Mary. Maybe you could start somewhere smaller and get some scholarships or something. That was the same story she had heard with her younger brother. Clark was an athlete. He played football in the fall, baseball in the spring, basketball in between. He ran track, too, taking the school to second or third at many of the meets he went to. And for that, he had colleges already making offers once he graduated. Mary wasn't just smart, though. She was also athletic. She took gymnastics, was excellent at softball, and was a solid member of the swim team. But her parents didn't have money for 2 sports teams to run at the same time, and Clark had the better claim. It just wouldn't make sense to have Clark miss a season because you want to play softball, Mary. If you want to get a little job and pay for it yourself, then that's fine, but we can't afford it, and this is Clark's future we're talking about. So, Mary had always been the ghost in her own home, someone who haunted the lives of those who were more important. Mary got up, not quite sure what all this was about, and went to the door that would lead her to her room. She was getting a little tired of this, and whatever the hell it was trying to tell her. And if this was her home, then she would just go haunt her room like usual. Instead, she stepped out into the hallway of Hamburg High School. The people walking by were familiar, but she couldn't have said their names. She knew them as faces in the cafeteria, voices in class, the shoes in the hallway. She walked the halls as she did most mornings, books held against her chest as she made her way towards the cafeteria to meet her friends. Whether this was still the house or something else, Mary no longer cared. It was too familiar to be denied, so she went about her day as she had every day since the 7th grade. She found them in the cafeteria, sitting around the table by the corner. There was Jazzy, her hands doing more talking than her mouth, which was saying something. Mark, looking bored as he watched her tell a story, and Reggie, who was sitting with an arm around her and laughing warmly. Her friends were the only people who really seemed to see her, but when she sat down, she saw the same black and white film descend over them. They didn't acknowledge her, didn't look at her, and when she tried to talk, Jazzy just talked over her, like she wasn't there. She suddenly felt like the people she had passed in the hall, a collection of sounds and shoes and nameless faces. It was sobering to realize that you were haunting your own life. Mark walked up the lane of games in the fair area, hands in his pockets. He was alone again, but that wasn't anything new. Mark usually felt like a third wheel, and he imagined that Mary felt the same. People, sometimes even Jazzy, asked him why he didn't just start a relationship with Mary, and he supposed that that would have made it easier to handle. They could have gone on double dates. She would have followed him around and given him someone to feel close to. But it wouldn't have been fair to Mary, or to Mark. Mary wasn't the one that Mark was waiting for, the subject of his unrequited fixation. Step right up, shoot the ducks, win your prize, beat today's high score, and win the big prize. Mark looked over to the man behind the shooting gallery and had to double take. It looked like the guy they had bought the tickets from, but this version was in a pinstripe shirt and a round-topped hat with a circular brim. He was grinning hugely, offering out the pellet gun for Mark to take, and opening his hands for his payment in the other. Mark passed him $1, grinning as he took up the gun and waited for the man to activate the shooting gallery. The lights came on as he looked down the sight, and as the ducks wafted by, Mark let fly. They fell just as quick, too, yellow and green ducks with little circles on them. A quail flew by, and Mark put it down, too. He missed the second quail, but he hit the third, and by that point, the lights were going out, and the man was clapping as he came back around. Excellent, my boy. Second place is no mean feat, he said, as he tossed him a stuffed dog. Second, Mark laughed. That was damn near perfect shooting. Can't believe I didn't get first. Sorry, my boy, the man trumpeted, commiserating as he indicated the little placard, but you were close. Mark looked up, and sure enough, he had missed it by 5 points. The revelation, however, wasn't what made him stop. The name in the first place spot was what had caught his eye, and he thought it must be a coincidence. R.A. was next to a perfect score, but Reggie was on the hayride with Jazzy. R.A. must be someone else. His Reggie Andrews was somewhere else. He started to walk away, but suddenly the idea that this R.A. was better than him was unbearable. Another one, he said, handing the barker another $1 as he prepared to shoot. The barker nodded, pocketing the money and setting it up again. Mark shot wonderfully again, but he couldn't seem to get all the quail when they came around. Pretty soon there were 7 stuffed dogs on the counter, and Mark was shaking as he handed the man another $1. Sir, it's okay to be second best. Don't let it... I said another, Mark yelled, physically stopping himself from turning the pellet gun on the man. The barker nodded, and when the third quail came out this time, he had him dead to rights. The quail, however, had other ideas. It veered out of the way as the pellet slapped against the back wall, impotently, and Mark slammed the gun down as he turned towards the man. It was a cheap trick. They had changed it somehow, and now he was gonna... The barker was gone, but there was another dog on the counter now, its collar proclaiming consolation prize. Mark took this one, walking off as he thought about the strange feeling that had come over him then. Mark would have thought he'd be used to being second best. After all, he'd been playing second fiddle to Reggie since the 6th grade. Whatever the competition, Reggie always seemed to come up ahead. Football, basketball, track, baseball, it didn't matter. Reggie always beat him, and Mark had never minded that. He didn't mind losing to Reggie, though it hadn't always been that way. Mark had spent most of the 7th grade silently loathing Reggie and his athletic prowess. Mark was used to being the best, to being the one to lead the pack, and coming to Hamburg had been an eye-opener. His goal for 7th grade, after losing the spot of first running back to Reggie the year before, had been to best him. They had been not enemies, he supposed. They were rivals. They challenged each other. But at the end of the 7th grade, when Reggie had handed him his number and told him to keep in touch over the summer, Mark had been gobsmacked. "You're a cool guy. I look forward to hanging out with you next year, too." Mark had realized then that the rivalry had been one-sided. Reggie had considered them friends, not enemies, and he had buried his misguided hatred of Reggie, if it had ever been that serious to start with. In truth, it had been something else that led him to hate Reggie, something that stoked the fires of his anger more than losing. "Hey there, kid," someone yelled, and Mark turned to find another barker, this one in an apron with a little paper hat. "You want to try some deep-fried delights?" This series of lookalikes was becoming a little jarring. Mark wondered if this was some kind of family-run carnival or something. Surely it wasn't always the same guy, right? "Nah," Mark said, hesitating as the delicious smell hit his nose. "I don't really eat anything fried." "Ah, I won't tell anyone if you don't," the guy said, winking as he held out a corn dog that was about twice as long as usual. Mark felt his mouth water as the smell of the fried food assaulted him. How long had it been since he'd had a corn dog? 10 years? Maybe 12? It had been before Dad had started insisting on their routine of physical health, that was for sure. So that meant it had been before his mother died, the catalyst for most of the things he now valued, or at least the things his dad valued. Mark tried to resist, but the smell was just too intoxicating. The first crunch was like heaven in his mouth. "Been a while?" asked the barker, and Mark nodded as he ate. After his mother's death, Mark's father had become obsessed with perfection. He and his son began to work out at 6 a.m. every morning, and they didn't finish until 7:30. Then Mark would eat 2 eggs, lean sausage, and 2 bananas. For lunch, he had a protein shake. For dinner, it was always some new nonsense, super greens or keto meals or something with a lot of protein and nutrients. Mark only understood a little of it. His dad had become a nutritionalist, or so he claimed, and he knew all kinds of things. But he knew that it got him in shape, and he knew it gave him an edge. He knew that edge was tenuous. "Want another?" the man asked, and Mark realized the first one was long gone. Mark licked his lips, his belly begging for more. "I better not." "What's the harm?" the barker asked, smiling as he produced a second corn dog. "You can always get rid of it later, right?" The corn dog stopped halfway to his mouth. "What?" Jazzy laughed as another of the scarecrows popped out of the corn. "They aren't very scary, are they?" she asked, leaning against Reggie as they rode in the back of the wagon. "Speak for yourself," Reggie said, jumping as another one leapt out of the corn plants. "Oh, you're just a big old scaredy cat," she teased. The line hadn't been too long, and they had offered to ride the 2 of them since they weren't in a group. It had been nice of them, the driver reminding her of the barker from the front gate as he told them to enjoy the ride. It was a little romantic, the 2 of them under the moon on the hayride, or it would have been without all the sudden leaping scarecrows. Reggie jumped again, and she stifled a chuckle. Reggie had always been jumpy. Even when they were kids, he had been very sensitive to things like horror movies or haunted houses. Jazzy had met Reggie when they were in 2nd grade, but apparently his fears were something from when he was smaller. None of his family seemed to want to talk about it, but Reggie had told her it had something to do with his sister. Melody had been 5 years older than Reggie, but she had died when he was 5. No one ever said how or why, but she was dead, and Reggie had seen it happen. It was something that haunted him to this day, and it was a topic that she was careful not to bring up. He wouldn't talk about it, but it was clearly always on his mind. She had seen him at night sometimes, on the nights his parents were away and she stayed over, the nights he had the dreams. He would wake her up, tossing and turning, calling out for his sister as he groaned and reached for her. She wanted to wake him up on those nights and ask him what was going on, but she didn't dare. He would tell her when he was ready. "I wish we could ride this a little longer," she said. But that was when she noticed how stiff he had become. She looked up and almost pulled away from him. Reggie was sitting up like a statue, his eyes locked ahead, and Jazzy was afraid that he had been seeing something that was too much for him. She looked over, but there was nothing there, not even one of the scarecrows, and his head was cocked a little to the side. His mouth was open slightly, his teeth almost chattering, and the sight of him like this made Jazzy scared. "Reggie? Reggie, what's wrong? What are you—" "Melody," he breathed out, and when he stood up, she fell against the side of the wagon. "Reggie!" she yelled, but he was already jumping out of the wagon and shouting his sister's name as he ran off into the corn. "Reggie!" she yelled, hopping out of the cart too and going after him. The corn whipped at her face and arms, stinging her as she chased her love, following him into the limitless field of yellow and gold. "What did you say?" Mark asked. The man at the counter pretended he hadn't heard him, wiping his rag as he returned to business as usual. "What did you— I assumed you knew since you were the one doing it. It's not a very practical habit, I think you'll agree." Mark stood in shock for a moment. How did this guy know about his dirty little secret? Nobody knew. At least, Mark didn't think they did. He'd been so very careful about where and when he did it. Never at school, only at the gym, and if his father wasn't home. Both ways meant that he could immediately brush his teeth, so he didn't have the usual deterioration you saw in people who were practicing extreme weight loss. And he certainly didn't show any of the other signs you saw in those who overindulged. People would have said that there was no sense to him doing it. Mark was in peak physical condition, and he really had no reason to, but that really wasn't the case. But, as his father said, there was always a new peak. It started in 9th grade. Mark had started putting on a little weight, but that was normal. Mark knew from health class that as you put on muscle, you gained weight. Mark had been working out, bulking up for football trials, hitting the gym hard all summer, and he had the muscle mass to show for it. That, however, had cut zero ice with his old man. "You're up 20 pounds. What have you been doing all summer?" Mark had stared confusedly at him until he repeated it, thinking the answer was obvious. When Mark explained it all to him, his father had scoffed, not believing him. No. A boy your age shouldn't be putting on that kind of weight. You'll just have to work harder. You can't be getting lax now. You're so close to perfection." Perfection had become a mania in his father. It was something that he'd been studying for years, apparently. Something he had tried to achieve when he was younger, but never quite succeeded. He was old now, though, but he thought it might be possible for Mark. He mentioned his weight, his muscle mass, his diet, everything. This sudden weight gain had been nothing to Mark, just the end result of his hard work. But to his dad, it was a catastrophe. He began to comment on it constantly, telling Mark he was letting himself get lazy. He needed to work harder to achieve perfection. If you ever hope to beat that boy, you need to do better. What's his name? Reg or Rand or something? Whoever, if you want to be the best, then you have to act like the best. It had unfortunately taken root in Mark as well. He had doubled down on the smoothies and worked out harder than he ever had, but it didn't matter. He couldn't lose the weight. And as his dad continued to hark on him and his imperfections, he took drastic measures. So he began to purge. So what? Lots of people did it. It wasn't new. It was just once a day. And when his dad congratulated him on dropping some weight, Mark had finally felt some of the pressure come off. So he had treated himself, a little cheat day, but in the end, he'd felt even worse. He could hear his father at the weigh-in the next day already. He would know what Mark had done. He would always know. So Mark had purged, gotten rid of all of it, tossed it up, left it behind, and the emptiness made him feel better than ever. His father had been happy with his weight, with his growth, with his advancement. And that was when Mark realized he couldn't stop. If he wanted to obtain perfection, he needed the edge it gave him. And if he achieved perfection, then maybe, just maybe, the object of his secret desire would finally take notice of him. "It's none of your business," Mark hissed at the man, tossing the corn dog away, his eyes trailing it as it made his mouth water, even from the dirt. "You're right," said the man. "It's yours. If it's how you achieve your so-called perfection, then it's your cross to bear. But do you really think you'll ever get there like that? Do you think it'll make him notice you?" Mark took a step back. How did he know? How could he know? No one knew. He had never told anyone. It was the worst of his secrets, the one he kept in plain sight. No one could know what his rival truly was, because if they discovered it, he truly would be lost. "No matter how you torture yourself, Mark, it's not going to do any good. You know, he won't see you that way. Not ever." "What choice do I have?" Mark asked. "I can't tell him. He'll never accept it. I just have to... Have to what? To hide yourself? To deny who you are? To chase a perfection that'll never be something you can achieve? You're chasing self-destruction, Mark. The only thing you'll achieve is an end, and an untimely one, if you keep on like this. You'll come to deny yourself, and eventually you'll hate yourself. Then it's just a quick descent into destruction." Mark opened his mouth, not sure how to answer this man. What the hell kind of place was this? "It's a funhouse, Mark. A house haunted not by the ghosts or ghouls that you expect, but by the demons that we carry within us. This haunted place is for self-discovery, for exercising the devils within us. Your demon is denial, and it's one of the hardest to expel. Don't spend your life denying yourself, denying your happiness, denying what could be because of what can never be. Be true to yourself, Mark. Be true and know yourself. Only then can you achieve perfection." Mark lay his head against the counter, wanting to deny him, but knowing that the barker was right. I've got a lot to think about," Mark whispered. But when he looked up, the booth was empty. Mary sat there, letting their words roll over her as they treated her like she wasn't there. Around her, The people at the tables sounded like her parents, like her friends, and the air was filled with those who overlooked her, unimportant, unseen, unloved, unknown. Suddenly she couldn't take it anymore. She got up and ran from the cafeteria, heading out into the hall populated by the faceless masses. They sounded like her parents too, like the friends who now looked through her, and Mary put her hands over her ears as she looked for respite. They were everywhere. They were surrounding her, mocking her, and as she saw the door to the bathroom, she realized it was her only option. How many times had the bathroom protected her? How many times had she run there when she needed a moment of silence during a long and trying day? She pushed inside now and was glad to find it empty. It was quiet, one of the first places devoid of the noise outside, and she went to the sink as she splashed water in her face. She looked up to find her reflection studying her with an alarming amount of speculation. It was almost as if it moved on its own, independent of her desires. "What are you doing?" the Mirror Mary asked her, causing her to stumble in surprise. She bumped into the door of the stall, eyes locked on the mirror image, as the Mirror Mary laughed at her. "What's wrong? It's perfectly fine when you tell the mirror your problems, but you don't expect me to talk back?" Mary was silent for a moment, contemplating her answer before speaking. "I'm sorry, it's just, you never did it before." It wasn't as if the mirror had never had the room to speak either. Whether it was the bathroom mirror, the mirror in her room, or the compact in her pocket, Mary often spoke to her reflection when she was alone. Her friends would have listened, but that would have placed the burden on them. Her parents would have listened, but Mary felt their answers would have been little more than lip service. In the end, Mary always felt that she had only herself to rely on, so she shared her problems with herself, and that was where they stayed. Mirror Mary smiled. "Maybe I've never had anything to say before." Mary chewed that over, finally nodding as she supposed that could be so. "Why are you hiding, Mary?" she asked, leaning to put her forehead against the glass. I don't know why it should bother me so much that no one sees me. After all, I've been invisible nearly all my life. Why would anybody notice me?" But no, that wasn't right. Her friends had never made her feel that way, and they were some of the few people who did see her. She was no ghost with them. They had never seen her as such. Mirror Mary smiled. "Exactly. Your family will never get there, but your friends seem to have figured it out. They value you in a way that no one else does. And if they can, then why not others? If you act like a ghost, then people will treat you like one. So don't be a ghost. You're the main character of your story, Mary. Go live your life." But, Mary said, some of the doubt returning, what if that changes? What if they come to see me as nothing but a nuisance? Then find others who can see your value. But I don't think they will. And I don't think you think they will either. So go back into that cafeteria and see your friends. They won't wait forever." Mary smiled, practically running to the bathroom door as she threw it open. But it wasn't the school that waited for her outside. It was the blank walls of her own home. And when she turned around, Mirror Mary was nowhere to be found. The cornstalks smacked at Reggie's face as he ran after the voice that he remembered from so long ago. He had tensed when he saw something moving in the corn, but when he had looked up, his blood had run cold. It was her. She had been sitting there in the corn like the world's most grotesque yard decoration. He had stood up as she pulled herself back in, but she had been gone as he gave chase. It couldn't be her. Melody had died 13 years ago, and it was his fault. As the stalks battered at him, he knew it was less than he deserved. He deserved to be scourged by those stalks, pummeled to bloody ruins. But his punishment had never come. He had lived with the guilt, with the knowledge that if it hadn't been for him, she would be alive. She had never dated, never gone to high school, never even graduated middle school. Reggie had stolen all that from her, with a couple of seconds of inattention. As he broke through the corn, Reggie found himself on the edge of a massive graveyard. As he looked at the headstones, he heard the voice of his long-dead sister once again. "Reggie," she half-whispered, drawing him into the rows as he searched for her. She couldn't be here. She had been laid to rest at Hedris Gardens over on 11th Street, but he would never forget that voice. She had begged him just that way as she lay there, broken and bleeding in the street. They had cleaned her up for the funeral, enough to have an open casket at least, but the damage was done for Reggie. No amount of makeup could cover the track across her face, the arm jutting up at an odd angle, or the way she had breathed against the puddle she lay next to, sending ripples up and across the surface. They had been coming home from school, and Reggie had been hamming it up. He was almost 6, and to him, he was invincible. He could be hurt. The universe had proven that last year, when he had almost broken his foot, but the idea of dying was as foreign to him as flying. He was young, and he would always be young. Adults were old because they had always been that way, and the idea that he might become one of them was laughable. He had been walking on the guardrail that separated the road from the sidewalk, and Melody had been yelling at him to get down. "Get down, Reggie. If you fall into traffic and get hit by a car, Mom will never let me hear the end of it." Reggie hadn't listened to her. Melody was 11, and she thought she knew everything. So what if she was in charge of him after school? She was just his big sister. She wasn't Mom or Dad. He ignored her, feeling the solidity of the metal beneath his feet as he balanced. It was fun, and Reggie wanted to see how far he could go before he had to get down. "I said get down, Reggie! You're gonna—" But she had stopped when she heard the engine revving up ahead. Reggie never saw the car as it barreled towards him. He had seen a cool bug walking on the rail, the two of them meeting in the middle, and as he prepared to step over it, he was suddenly shoved very hard into the road. It all happened in slow motion, Reggie falling like a leaf from an autumn tree, and when he hit the pavement, he skinned both hands and the side of his leg. He had sat down, already crying as the pain jagged through him, and started looking around for Melody. "You pushed me!" he yelled, querulously, as only a 5-year-old can. "Why did you—" But that's when he noticed the back half of the car as it stuck out of the ditch. He could see it because it had gone straight through the guardrail and was ticking and smoking from between the brake and the metal. The driver would turn out to be dead, the man having lost control of his vehicle due to a malfunction. But that was for later, and the body in the street was for now. The body of his sister, Melody, was laying in a heap near the rail. The car had passed completely over her, crunching her legs, her arms, twisting her neck, bloodying her nose, and leaving a tire tread across the right side of her face. She was shuddering into death, her breath sounding ragged and forced as she tried to make her deflated left lung work. There was a puddle of something beside her face, a dirty circle of water with a crushed cigarette butt floating in it, and her final breath was sending ripples through it. "Reggie," she rasped a single time, her good eye turning to him a single time before going out forever. A different car had found him in the road, crying for his dead sister and for the unwanted knowledge that death could come for anyone. It was one of the most important events in Reggie's life, and for better or worse, it had made him into the person he was now. That sounded macabre even to him, but it really molded all the decisions Reggie made from then on. If Reggie was taking chances, if he was doing something foolish, if he was doing something unlawful, if he was doing anything that a parental figure might think was unworthy, he would hear that raspy, whispered voice, and he would fix his course. He hadn't heard that raspy voice when he finally told Jazzy how he felt, and that was a big reason that they were still together. The dreams were there too, should he forget his slip-up, as if he needed a reminder. One of the gravestones clipped his leg, and Reggie went down, his face smushing against the fresh dirt over one of the graves. He looked up, earth falling from his cheeks, to see the name on the headstone, Melody Rivers, beloved daughter. Reggie scuttled away, panting as he tried to make sense of it. This couldn't be here. Why would they put this here? Melody was buried miles from here. It made no sense to... The ground began to shake, and the earth he had fallen into suddenly began to sink into the grave. It was replaced by water, dirty water, with a cigarette butt floating in it, and the level was rising to the very edge of the grave plot. The ripples from the middle hit the turf, the same ripples Melody had made before she died. And when something rose to the surface, Reggie felt his teeth clack together as he tried to make sense of it. It was like every nightmare he had ever had after the accident, a nightmare he was glad to see end when he was 14. The corpse of his sister had moved plenty in his nightmares. Every night he was back in the road, his hands and legs bleeding. As he watched, she would drag herself across the road, whispering his name as her bloody body left a streak across the ground. In his nightmare, Reggie couldn't move, couldn't scream. He just watched her get closer and closer, seeing her one good eye look at him with hatred. He would always wake up before she got him, but he always feared the time that he wouldn't. Today, it appeared that she would get him at long last. She was crawling out of the grave, dripping water from her funeral garb. She was a horror worthy of the movie screen. All the work the coroner had done on her was gone. All the rouge and paint in the world couldn't fix her now. She was the same wheezing corpse that he had seen when he was 5, and as she pushed herself up on the lip of the grave and glowered at him, Reggie kept backtracking, the grass and the gravel grating under him, before he finally came up short against the tombstone in the next row over. "Reggie," she rasped, the two of them staring at each other over a long moment before she did something that she had never done before. She spoke again. "You have to stop blaming yourself for my death." "What?" Reggie asked, the gravestone against his back, cold and unyielding. "I am not your failure," Melody rasped, pulling her broken lips into a smile. "You were my greatest success. I saved you, and I did it without a thought. I didn't save you, however, so you could blame yourself for me. Go, live your life free of guilt over me. You deserve better. You deserve not to weigh every decision against my sacrifice. Go, be your own person. Enjoy your life." Reggie didn't know what to say, could only sit and gape at her as she smiled lopsidedly at him. "I take this burden from you, now and forever. Live your life outside my shadow. I love you, Reggie. I always have, and I always will. That's why I kept you safe, so you could go and live your life." She sank back into the grave then, the water retreating as the dirt came back up to fill it. Reggie just sat there, panting as he tried to make sense of all of it. He had to admit that some of the weight he had been feeling was gone. Some of the burden lifted. His soul felt lighter. Maybe, he thought, he could live without Melody at long last. "Reggie!" He looked back at the field of corn, a fog that had enveloped his mind beginning to lift. Jazzy. He had left Jazzy behind. He turned to head into the corn to look for her. But that was when things began to change. The Barker waved as a couple left, both looking like they had received a great truth. They all left like that. It was what the Barker did for people. Everyone had problems. Even the Barker had problems, but that was what the Barker was here for, after all. The Barker was a problem solver, a creature of order, and it made him feel good to help people get over the trauma that so often held them back. Some people, of course, couldn't be helped. He had discovered that last year when he had made the mistake of wandering into someone else's territory. The Barker shuddered. He didn't like to think about that. It was his own fault. He should have known that Kashmir wasn't the place for him. He would remember. He would be on the lookout for other such places from now on. Hamburg, however, seemed safe enough, and this island was an added bonus. There was a lot of history here, a lot of energy here, and despite being helpful, the Barker was still capable of tapping into that dark energy to help others. Darkness to light, that was his way. The Barker looked up suddenly, his nostrils flaring as he took a deep whiff. Something rotten was in the air, something familiar. He looked up and into the fog that was gathering around the bridge. It had seemed fun when he'd first seen it, a real neat effect to go with his haunted carnival. But as something came over the bridge, he thought it might be less neat and more of a concern. The shadows were not those of interested thrill seekers, not by a long shot. One of them was huge, a gargantuan with things moving on him, and as they approached, the Barker put on his best smile as he prepared to bluff his way out of danger yet again. He prayed his suspicions were wrong. "I do apologize, but the hour is quite late, and the carnival is only open till 9. You'll have to come back tomorrow." But as he looked up, he saw that his fears had been valid. There were 5 of them. The 3 in the lead bore the faces that he had given them, the harsh, orange visages of carved pumpkins with the candle-lit eyes of porch decorations. Beside him was a man in a long coat and a tall hat, a man the Barker knew. His face was hidden in a shadowy circle, but the eyes were something else. The shadows did little to hide the angry red coals that looked out from beneath that cowl. The last, that hulking brute, was the worst one yet. He was massive, 7 feet tall, and nearly as wide, and his body seemed to be made of vines or roots. As he moved out of the fog, the Barker could see that his skin was made of living corn stalks, the plants growing amongst them looking hale and hardy. He was a strange golem of living plant life, but the Barker knew what lay behind that facade. "Gentlemen, if you're here to try and recruit me, I've already told you I'm not interested." One of the pumpkin heads stepped forward, and the Barker tried not to cringe as its tongue slid out and picked a beetle off its cheek. "It is not up for debate anymore, if ever it was." The Barker stiffened, looking at the man in the coat as he shook his head. "Whistler, I see he has finally convinced you to join up. And Corn Man, you too. I had thought better of you than to be in such mixed company as this. The man in the coat, the whistler, shrugged nonchalantly, but the glitter in his eyes told the Barker all he needed to know. Times are changing, Barker, and we must change with them. From the corn man there was no reply, but the Pumpkinhead seemed to be getting impatient. He's not asking anymore. The Green Man is calling all his chickens home, and he's done letting you roam free. The Barker laughed. The Green Man? I don't answer to your Green Man, and I certainly don't answer to you. It's bad manners to encroach on someone's territory, even if it's temporary. I would like the 5 of you to leave. They did not leave, but the Barker hadn't really expected that they would. We aren't going anywhere, not unless you're coming with us. He has very specific orders, and we don't leave unless his will is done. The Barker took a step back towards the park. You know, there's no way you can take me once I enter this gate. The Pumpkinhead grinned at him. We'll take you. It's only a matter of time. He stepped through the arch, the mist swirling around him. Good luck, then, said the Barker. He vanished, and they gave him a little head start before they came in after him. The fog was thick, but it didn't bother them. They had been through thicker. When they came to the crossroads, the Pumpkinhead slid his long tongue over his thick orange lips again, tasting the air for his quarry. Whistler, why don't you check out the haunted house? Corn Man, take the corn maze. As for us, he said, looking at his fellow Pumpkinheads, looks like we're heading to the fair. If you find him, be careful. He's slippery. Mary wasn't sure what was going on, but she was starting to freak out. She had walked out of her school's bathroom and into her own home, but it wasn't the home that she remembered. The carpet was plush, the walls were the same flat eggshell that they had always been, and the pictures on the wall were very familiar, but normally in her parents' home it was only 2 left turns before you came out to the hallway and into the kitchen. Mary had been taking lefts for the past 30 minutes and had yet to find anything but more hallways. The layout was abnormal too. There were crossroads, 4-way stops, and switchbacks that could have sent her to anywhere but more hallways. Now the walls were becoming darker and darker as she went, going from eggshell to a charred gray, and the carpet had been getting shorter and shorter, until now it was like the stuff in her dad's study. Burma, he had called it, and it was scratchy when she sat on it. The lights had changed too. They had shrunk from the long tube lights that her parents had in the halls to the little circular ones that you sometimes saw in rich people's bathrooms. To Mary, they looked like eyes more than anything. And now, there was someone else here too. Mary recognized the girl from school, someone she'd passed a dozen times but never spoke to, and it was clear that the girl recognized her as well. Fancy seeing you here. I think you're the first person I've seen in a while. Any idea what this place is? I don't know. It was my house for a while, but the farther I go in, the less it looks like it. The girl laughed. Mine too. The floor went from tile to hardwood and from popcorn to smooth ceilings, and it just kept changing the further in I went. Mary wanted to ask the girl what she had been seeing other than that, but that was when they started hearing the sound. You hear that? The girl asked, stopping and cocking her head like a dog. Sounds like someone whistling. It seemed to give the girl hope, but Mary didn't like it. The sound was off, the tone completely wrong, but to her new friend, It seemed to indicate that there was someone else close by. Before Mary could muster the courage to try and convince her otherwise, they met the person responsible for the sound. The other girl called out to them. It was a man in a long coat, but Mary felt something clench inside her when she saw him. It was something primal, an instinct to stay away, and when she tried to pull the other girl back, she seemed confused. "What? It's someone else. Maybe we can all help each other." Mary shook her head, trying to convey to the girl that something was off, but she must not have done a good job because the girl pushed free and started toward him. Mary saw that red eye as it looked up at her, watching her approach, but she had thrown herself around the corner before it could see her. The whistling stopped, but it was soon replaced by the sound of screaming. Whatever he was, it appeared he wasn't as harmless as the girl had thought. Mary leaned against the wall, shuddering as she listened to the thing finish whatever it was doing. Whether it was eating her or just smushing her down into his coat pocket, Mary didn't know, but soon the whistling was back, and the sound of it sent chills through her. It got closer as it drew closer, and Mary was certain that any minute it would pop around the corner and get her. Louder and louder. He must be feet away. Louder and louder. He must be right on top of her. It stopped, inches from the corner, Mary shaking like a leaf, before he turned on a heel, clomped up the hallway, back the way he'd come. Mary waited to a count of 20, then 30, then 60, before she headed back the way that she had come too. She knew that she couldn't get out that way, but her options seemed limited, and she knew that she didn't want to take any path that might lead her back to that thing. Something was wrong. Mark could feel it. Before now, everything had been dreamy, a kind of foggy other space where Mark had been alone, but as he moved away from the snack bar and deeper into the midway, he started to hear other people. Voices, many raised in confusion, whispered around him, and as he came past a dark duck booth, he saw about 10 people in the midway, looking lost. The fog was thicker than he had ever seen it, obscuring many of them further when he finally came across them. As Mark approached the group, he could see 3 others coming out of the fog in the direction of the front. These 3, however, didn't seem like the others. These 3 were different. These 3 were wearing masks. Pumpkin masks. "Hey!" shouted someone, walking towards them as he waved his hands. "Hey! Any idea how we get out of here?" The masked men cocked their head in unison at the group, the one out front approaching the speaker as he asked him again how they got out of there. "Leave?" the masked man said. "Why? We just got here." The speaker, a tall guy in his early 20s, seemed to think better of approaching him. The pumpkin-headed man cocked his head in the other direction, closing the distance between himself and the speaker with an artful little hop-skip. That was when Mark noticed that the man wasn't unarmed. There was something long and thick in his hand, something like a bat or a baton. "Let's play a little game, shall we? I think I'm in the mood for a game. Don't you, boys?" The other pumpkin heads nodded enthusiastically, and the man must have felt like he was too close, because he took a long step away from the pumpkin head. Not long enough, though. "How about a game of tag?" the pumpkin head said, lunging as he struck the man in the head with his cudgel. "Tag! You're it!" The silver bat swung in a long arc before slamming into his skull. A gout of blood fell across the pavement, the man's neck snapping to the side as he fell. He twitched several times, his arms reaching for his head, but they seemed unable to make the full trip. The others broke then, running and screaming, and Mark joined them as he headed back into the midway. The Pumpkinheads gave chase, and Mark was already looking for a good place to hide. The game was on, and to be tagged was to get more than a short rest between games. Mark jumped behind the counter of a ring toss booth, and as he came to rest under it, he heard someone stifle a scream. He glanced to his left and saw a girl about his age, hiding beneath the counter too. She had a hand over her mouth, and he could see blood on the front of her blouse. He wondered if she had been close enough to the man who had been tagged to catch some of the spray, but it was a thought that was erased quickly as he heard the crunch of boots on concrete. They were here, and the game had begun. "Spread out," said the one with the silver bat. "No witnesses. If we kill enough of them, the old fool is bound to come out to protect the rabble." The woman put another hand over her mouth, shaking as the sound of feet got closer. Mark looked around, wanting options. He could make a run for it, but he didn't think he could just leave the poor woman here. He could run anyway and draw them off, but there was no way to know if all of them would follow him. He could fight, but that would just get him killed. They were quick, they were strong, and he didn't have a weapon. When his eyes found the crowbar, Mark realized that might not be true. He grabbed up the cold metal thing, gripping it tight as he got ready for whatever was to come. There was a loud, wet whump as someone was hit, and one of the pumpkins shouted for another to come help him. "Damn kid's feisty," he rasped. And when someone answered from the other side of the counter, Mark turned to the girl. "If you're going to run," he mouthed, "I'd do it now." With that, Mark made his move. He vaulted over the counter in one smooth move, catching the Pumpkinhead mid-turn as he splattered him. There was no blood, no brain matter to speak of, but the head broke open with a wet pop, sending seeds and pulp everywhere. The other two turned, the silver-batted one glowering at him with his candlelight eyes, but Mark did not stick around to fight 2-on-1. Mark ran deeper into the midway, trying to find another exit so he could find a way out of here. Jazzy sat in the middle of the field, her knees against her chest as she wept. She was lost amongst the corn, and there was no escape now. She had followed Reggie as close as she could, but it hadn't made any difference. She had lost him in the corn, and now they were both gone. She'd never find him, never see him again. Just thinking about it made her sob all the harder. She put her head against her knees, the tears wetting her dress, as she wondered how she would ever find her way out of this. "What's wrong?" Jazzy started, looking up to see, of all things, a little girl peeking out of the corn. She was so small, 4 or 5 at the most, and she was wearing one of her father's shirts as a nightgown. It covered all but her toes, 10 dirty little piggies that had spent far too much time in the mud. "Are you okay?" the little girl asked, coming slowly from the corn and walking towards her. She was young. What was she doing out here? It wasn't freezing out, but it was late October. What the hell was she doing out here, barefoot and in a nightgown? "How did you get out here?" Jazzy asked, sitting up a bit as she tried to make herself look less pathetic. "I'm lost," the little girl said, reaching out for Jazzy as she shivered in the night air. "Do you know where we are?" Jazzy shook her head, taking the little girl's hand as it was offered. "No, but maybe we can find our way out together. Would you like that? Would you like to come with me?" The little girl nodded, and they began to walk through the corn. The field seemed to stretch on forever, and Jazzy wasn't as scared as she had been. Jazzy had always felt better when she had other people around her. At first it had been her parents, then it had been Reggie, and finally it was Mark and Mary, and they had felt like a little family as they stuck together. Jazzy was Not what you would call popular, but neither was Mary, and Reggie and Mark never let their place on the football team go to their head. Jazzy liked her little found family. It made her feel like she had someone, some place to belong to. "Did you lose your parents?" Jazzy asked, as the two of them walked through the corn. "Yeah," the little girl said with a nod. "I think so. What about you? Did you lose your parents?" "No," Jazzy said. "I was here with my boyfriend, but he got scared and ran away, and I can't find him." The little girl made a face. "Ew, boys are gross anyway. It's probably better without him anyway." "No, Reggie's not gross. He's the nicest guy I've ever met. I think I love him, in fact. I'm pretty sure of it." Jazzy froze as someone called her name from not too far off. It sounded like Reggie, but when she tried to go that way, the little girl held her back. She had a death grip on her hand, and when Jazzy asked her what was wrong, she shook her head and pitched her voice low. "It's a trick. Let's not go towards them." "But it sounds like Reggie," Jazzy put in. "If he's looking for us, then maybe he can help us get out." The little girl refused to let go, trying to pull her deeper into the corn as the voice continued to call out to her. "That's how the monsters get you," the little girl said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. They call your name, and then you follow them into the woods, and then they gobble you up. Don't you know anything?" Jazzy was pretty certain that the person calling was Reggie, but the little girl had made her rethink it. Could she really be sure it wasn't a trick? Who would be trying to trick them? She didn't know, but this whole thing was so weird that she found herself following the little girl as the two of them went back into the corn. "We have to be careful," the little girl whispered. "He might hear us." "Who?" Jazzy asked, looking around fitfully. "This thing that some of my friends told me about. This old story about a monster in the corn. They say that he lives in the corn and he grants wishes, but he also hurts people. Sometimes he even kills them. They call him..." But that was when they heard it. The rustling in the corn. It sounded big, like something huge was moving amongst the stalks, and the two of them stopped. Jazzy was suddenly overcome with a deep and unmoving fear. It swept through her like a metal wire, holding her in place. She looked at the girl, the one trembling in her hands, and heard her quietly humming something. "Corn man, I can stand as the corn stalks can. Corn man, still as stone, not like a man. Corn man, still and quiet as the corn stalks can." The rustling got closer, the stalks rattling faster now. Whatever was out there, it knew they were there and it was coming for them. Jazzy wanted to run like a scared rabbit, but that wire was coiled so tightly in her that she could barely breathe. "He's coming," the little girl whispered, and she closed her eyes as the two of them quivered in the corn. "Jazzy!" someone yelled, and as they erupted from the corn, she breathed a sigh of relief. Reggie had found them there, and the smile that broke across his face was cherubic. "Thank God! I didn't think I'd ever find you." When the vines exploded out of his chest, spraying Jazzy with blood, the scream that rose in her was nothing but the whisper of a deflating tire. Mary wanted to run, but she made herself be quiet, and she made herself get low. The whistling assaulted her, following her up corridors and down pathways. Sometimes he was in front of her, sometimes he was behind her, but it was pretty clear that he was stalking her. There were others, because aren't there always, and he clearly found them. They screamed, they begged, and they died. Mary kept going, kept hoping for a way out, but the longer she went, the less likely it seemed. The halls were deteriorating, melting like wax candles, and the lights had begun to flicker. It was a true haunted house now, and as Mary slunk along, she kept her eyes peeled for her whistling stalker. She peeked around the corner, looking for the whistler, but what she found was a dark hallway with no discernible floor. Instead, there were small lights along the sides of the walls, and Mary slipped a hand along the wall so she wouldn't get lost in that surrounding murk. She slid her feet along like a tightrope walker, always preparing for the moment when the ground would go out from under her and she would fall like Alice down the rabbit hole. All the while, that maddening whistling followed her, no matter where she went. The screams had stopped not so long ago, but this was the first time Mary realized how quiet the haunted house was. She could be the last one left, or she could have just moved beyond whoever else was left. Mary found that she didn't much care. She just wanted to get out of here. She wanted to go home, to get under her covers and feel safe in a way that she hadn't since she was very small. She wanted to run into her parents' room and sleep between them, something she hadn't done since the day before kindergarten. Mary swore that if she made it out of this place, she would never do anything like this again. All the realization and comfort she had gained from the haunted house had melted like snow on the first warm day of the year, and now she just wanted to feel normal and safe and secure again. She was halfway down the hall when something spoke to her, and she honestly hoped that it wasn't the whistler. It was the voice beneath the monster's voice of every horror movie antagonist. It was the lilting tone of a man who threatens a woman with the most intimate of punishments, and it was the voice that you can only hear in the darkest of your nightmares. When the whistler spoke, it was the sound of creeping dread. "Come out, little one. Come out and let me see you. You've done such a good job of hiding, but our game is over. Now it's time to let me see you before I lose my patience." Mary knew that if that thing caught her, it would do more than take her life. Mary knew that if it caught her, she would cease to be anything like a person. Mary knew that it would make her a casualty in the truest sense of the word. She was against the wall, all of her energy spent trying to stop her knees from shaking, and she wondered what she would do. She couldn't move, and she certainly couldn't fight this thing, so her options seemed to be to give up or continue to hide. She wanted to cry. Crying would do her no good, though. She was capable only of staying still and hoping that it lost interest in her. The footsteps from the other side of the hall grew louder, and the whistling seemed to grow with them. Mary bit her lower lip to stop her teeth from chattering, and hoped it would stop the sob from ripping up her throat. The footsteps got closer, and the whistling was nearly deafening. She sank to her knees as she tried to make herself as small as possible. The whistling was very loud, and the footsteps sounded like they were coming up the dark hallway. When the hands settled around her shoulders, it took her a moment of thrashing to realize they were behind her instead of in front of her. She tried to pull free, but the hands had a firm grip on her as they yanked her backwards into the wall. The plaster that had seemed so solid only a moment before was now as porous as cheesecloth, and Mary slid silently into the wall as the shadow of the whistler fell across her. He cried out and lunged for her, but Mary was already disappearing into the wall. "You cannot escape me forever," the whistler promised. Mary didn't know how she had escaped him, but as she turned to see the carnival barker holding his hands up defensively, she realized that she had had help. Jazzy wanted to scream. She wanted to grab hold of her man and pull him to her for whatever time she had left. She wanted to throw herself at the creature that had killed him, but in the end, she could have done none of those things. The metal wire of fear had wrapped itself around her. The metal wire of fear had wrapped itself around her with such force that she could neither move or talk. She just crouched there, gripping onto the young girl as if to protect her from the monstrosity that had snuck up on them. Jazzy had heard of the Corn Man. She and Reggie had heard of him when they were in elementary school, but it had been so long ago that she had never really put any credence to it. The stories were swapped in coat closets, under the slide, and in the dark areas where children often trade dark tales. As she crouched there shivering, she remembered that there had been a second part to the story. The Corn Man would kill you in a grisly fashion, but he could also grant you a wish. There didn't seem to be any sort of rules to these wishes, and Jazzy didn't need the little girl to whisper to her as she clutched her to her chest. "We have to stay still. If we stay still, then he can't hurt us." Jazzy knew this, and as they knelt there in the cornfield, she tried her best not to pass out and get killed on general principle. The Corn Man had let Reggie fall into a pool of his own blood. As he stalked around them, Reggie was gurgling pitifully, not quite dead yet, but Jazzy thought he wouldn't last much longer. He had been pierced through the chest in 3 different places, and you didn't just walk away from something like that. The vines had gone through areas that definitely looked important, and even if he survived, there was no way that she could get him out of the field before he bled to death. Reggie would die one way or another, and the only chance was that the Corn Man legend was true. As it leaned down to bring its rotting vegetable face close enough that they could see the bugs crawling over the disgusting surface, Jazzy supposed that there was no real question whether the Corn Man was legit or not. This was no psycho in a costume, no clever bit of makeup, and if he wanted to kill them, it would be all too easy. Reggie had been no small fry, and he had put him down with relative ease. What chance did Jazzy and a little girl have against something like that? As the man she loved bled out his last in the middle of this endless cornfield, Jazzy and the little girl stayed as still as the corn stalks that surrounded them, and finally, the Corn Man was satisfied. "Ye have fulfilled my bargain, and are owed a boon. Tell me, what would you have of the Corn Man?" It took Jazzy a moment to find her voice, and when she spoke, it was barely audible. "I want him," she said, as she pointed at Reggie. "I want him alive, as he was before you killed him." The Corn Man looked down at Reggie, waving a hand at him before growling, "Granted." Then he moved off into the corn, and Jazzy realized that they had been dismissed. She went to Reggie, checking his pulse and finding that he was alive. His wounds had been healed, but there was blood still on the ground. She supposed that Corn Man had done as she asked, and when he gasped and sat up, she hugged him in surprise and joy. She had expected the Corn Man to give her some sort of monkey paw wish, but she supposed he had been true. "What the hell happened?" Reggie asked as he looked around. Did I go to sleep or something?" "We've got to get out of here," Jazzy said. "Something is going on, and we need to find Mary and Mark and get out of here while we still can." "Fine by me," Reggie said, as he rubbed a hand across the side of his face. "I think I've had enough haunted carnivals for a lifetime." Jazzy helped him up, his legs still a little shaky, and they had taken a few steps before she looked back, remembering the girl. Jazzy glanced around, not sure where the girl had gone to, but when she went to call out to her, she realized the futility. The girl had never given her name, and Jazzy couldn't imagine where she had gotten off to in such a hurry. She looked around frantically, not wanting to leave the girl behind, and when Reggie asked what was wrong, she told him that she had lost track of someone that she had met in the corn. "Did you have someone with you?" Reggie asked, looking confused. "Yes," Jazzy said as she glanced around. "It was a little girl. You saw her. She was there when you came out of the corn and fell down," Jazzy corrected, not ready to tell him that he had had a near-death experience. Reggie thought about it before shaking his head slowly. "No, when I came out of the corn, it was just you. You were crouched in that spot, talking to yourself, and then I guess I passed out or something, because the next thing I know, I was waking up in the cornfield." "No," Jazzy said. "No, you had to have seen her. She would have been right." But Jazzy thought she understood then why the little girl had looked so familiar. Jazzy's mother had told her that she needed to grow up, and it seemed that maybe her childhood had come to help her one last time before she did. "Jazz, are you feeling okay, honey?" Jazzy nodded, kissing him on the cheek and telling him that she would be okay. They had come back to the track where the tractor had been when they heard a rustling in the corn. Both of them stood still as they could, Jazzy telling him that it might be one of the people that was causing the trouble. In her mind, she thought it was the corn man. Then they could stand still again and he would go away. She didn't care if he gave her another wish. He had already given her the only thing she really wanted at that moment, and she couldn't think of anything else to ask for. When the corn stalks parted, though, it was no hulking monster, but Mark who came stumbling towards them. "Thank goodness! I wasn't sure what had happened to you guys. I remembered you said you were going to take a hayride, so when I came across the entrance, I thought maybe you guys had gotten stuck out there. I didn't have a hope that I'd find you, but I'm glad I did." Mark looked a mess. The knee of his jeans was torn, his normally well-groomed hair was hanging raggedly from sweat, and he had what looked like a pumpkin-splattered crowbar over one shoulder. He was out of breath and clearly flustered, but other than that, he didn't look much the worse for wear. That he had been involved in something as strange or terrifying as what the two of them had been involved in, Jazzy had no doubt, though. "Have you seen Mary?" Jazzy asked, trying not to notice the strangely shy way that Mark was looking at Reggie as he got under one arm. "No, or she'd be with me too. She was heading for the ghost house, right? Maybe we should..." But the monsters had apparently gotten tired of hiding. Two of the pumpkin heads came out of the fair, and with a whistle and a laugh, they were joined by a man in a tall hat and a long coat. Behind them, the corn man came out of the stalks, but not enough to make Jazzy think he would join them. He would block their escape, she thought, but he would take no part. They were trapped. She followed the Barker deeper into the house, and when they came into the little room at the end of the hall, she didn't find what she had expected. She had expected a witch's den, complete with cauldron and ravens and shelves full of spell books. What she got was like something out of a Saw movie. It was a dank little brick room with several security cameras showing various angles on the Carnival, and a large padded chair that someone could sit in and watch it all unfold. "We can wait here until they leave. It'll be all right, don't worry," the Barker assured her. "Would you like some tea? I've got several different..." But she barely heard him. It was just so strange, all of this, and Mary wasn't quite sure what to make of it. "Where are we?" she finally asked, not sure what to say, so just saying the first thing that came to mind. "It's my safe house. I usually try to have a way out when I can, and a place to hide when I can't." He offered her tea in a chipped cup, and she thanked him as she took it. It was hot and rich, and Mary suspected that it might be actual tea leaves instead of the bag stuff that you often got from the store. She sipped at it as he made his own cup, and when he offered her a seat, she took it. She didn't know why she wasn't more wary of him. He was a stranger, and you were supposed to be careful around strangers, but she felt like he wasn't quite a stranger. Not really. He seemed familiar to her, though they had never actually met, and she found herself thankful that he had saved her from the Whistler. Who was that anyway, she asked, watching him as he moved over to the cameras. Oh, people like me. Well, not people. Not really. They were, once, but they've been changed by him. He comes to them, you see, when they are at their weakest, and offers them things. Freedom, strength, abilities, whatever they're after. What he doesn't tell them is the power is like a collar. They have the power, and it will always belong to them, but they owe him for that power. He can't take it back, but he can hold it over you, and the time is coming when he is calling in his markers, and markers and debt are the currency of his world. He who? Asked Maria, blowing across the cup before sipping. The Green Man, he said, breathing it out like he was afraid to say it too loudly. Who's the Green Man? He is from outside our world. He is a spirit of winter, from a place where winter could last for years. He is the Lord of Fall, the grower and the taker of the harvest, the cold one, and he who takes sacrifice. He has power, and he uses it. He is the reason that I can help people at all. Something flashed across the screen for a moment, people running and things running after them, but it went by too fast for Mary to see. Why would you accept power from something like that? You don't seem like the Whistler. You're the one who helped me, aren't you? She asked, starting to put it together. When the barker turned around, Mary pulled away a little. His face had become hers. I got the idea from your mind, he said, grinning. But yes, it was me. He moved a hand down and across it and was suddenly himself again. I like to help people, to show them how they're hurting themselves and how they can help themselves. That's why I run my yearly event, so I can help people. All I have ever done is help people. That's how he caught me. He knew my efforts were failing, my funds depleting, and he offered me the ability to help more people than I would ever help in my lifetime with my limited resources. I accepted, of course I did, not knowing what he was, and now he has my number. I've run from him for so long, but this is the closest they have ever actually come to catching me. What about the people you helped here? Mary asked, and she felt a little guilty to see him look away, clearly uncomfortable. Do they get to suffer because these things are after you? I feel terrible about that, he said, the steam from his tea lifting into his face, but there isn't anything I can do. I can't let them have me. I can't help people if I'm under his power. Mary was about to say something, but then the camera buzzed over another scene, and she felt her breath stick in her throat. There they were, Jazzy, Mark, and Reggie, and they were trapped. Mark had a crowbar. He was trying to make a stand as they crept in on him. Reggie looked like he was having trouble standing. Jazzy was looking around fitfully, not sure what to do, and seeming so helpless that it hurt her heart. She stepped closer as something monstrous rose up in the corn behind them, and then it switched over to show another part of the carnival. I'm sorry, said the barker. I'd have brought them here too, but I can't risk them finding me. Isn't there anything you can do? She said. They're my friends. I mean, you've been inside my head, so you know how much they mean to me. The barker nodded. I do. But if I go out there, I might as well give up. They'll overpower me. They'll take me back to him. And then let me out, Mary said. putting her tea down as she headed up the hall. "Why?" the barker asked, following behind her. "They'll leave once they've finished with everyone. All we have to do is stay put." He followed her down the little hallway, trailing her as she pushed at the walls near where they had come in. "I would rather die with them than live knowing I did nothing. If you've truly been in my head, then you know that. Hell, you were the one that reminded me of how important they are. What's more, if you claim that helping people is your life's work, I don't believe you can sit here and watch them die while you hide." She went right on pushing at the walls for a moment, before a hand fell on her shoulder. "It's funny. I help so many people, but it takes one of you to remind me who I am." Mary looked up, hopeful. "You'll help them?" "Yes, but we'll need to hurry. I might have something that I can do to make this right. Something I should have done from the start. Come on, I know a shortcut." They headed down a hallway that Mary was pretty sure hadn't been there before, and as they ran, she prayed that they would make it in time. "Reggie," Mark said, sounding worried but putting on a brave face, "if you have anything left in the tank, now would be the time to use it." Reggie groaned as he tried to get his feet under him, but he panted as he shook his head. It was taking everything in him just to stand, and he felt like he was just getting over a bad case of the flu. He had no energy, he was weak as a kitten, and he felt terrible that he couldn't protect Jazzy or Mark. Mark gritted his teeth, preparing to lunge at one of the pumpkin heads when they got in close, already knowing that it would be the death of him once they got him. Death would almost be preferable to the tuneless whistling that swarmed around him like bees. The man in the coat had yet to make a move, but all that whistling was like nails on a chalkboard, and Mark felt like it was eroding his sanity the longer it went on. They didn't dare back up too much, the corn man lurking behind them, and they made their peace as they prepared to fight and die. "Stop!" They turned, all of them, and there he was. The barker was standing in the road, Mary beside him, and as he spread his arms wide, the whistler and the pumpkin heads began to stalk towards him. Mary came around him, joining her friends as she moved to Reggie's other side, helping him stand for whatever was to come. "No need for all this. I'll go quietly." "Corn man," he said, turning to the hulking thing as it stood in the field, "is there some way I can cash in your boon before I go?" The corn man came lumbering from the corn, the kids scuttling out of the way as he towered over them. "Ye know that I am unable to use my gifts against those in his service, dear Barker. If it is your intention to escape through use of my favor, then I must refuse." The barker shook his head. "It is not, though I thank you for your candor. No, I would wish for you to return to life those who fell because of my cowardice this night. Bring back the patrons of my carnival who are gone, and I'll consider it even." The hulking thing seemed to grin as much as it could, and it was strange indeed. A tall order. "Too much to ask?" the barker said, clearly knowing the answer. "It is done," the corn man said with a sigh. "Now, as you promised, it is time to go." "Unless you'd rather run," the whistler said, the glee evident. "Then we could just see how many of these people we can kill again before we caught you." "There will be no need for that," the barker said as he spread his hands. "Let's go. I wouldn't want to keep His Highness waiting." The pumpkin head bristled at that. "We will suffer no slight against the Winter Lord. You are his vassal, as we are, and you will accord him the proper respect." "Are we going or not?" the barker asked, allowing them to take an arm each as the 5 of them disappeared into the fog that had suddenly risen around them. "My friends," he called back, his voice easily reaching the group, that sat shivering amidst the fog. "I do hope you have enjoyed this year's festivities. I pray I may count you amongst my satisfied customers, and that I will see you again some Halloween night." When the fog parted, the group was left staring at a blank stretch of dirt, the monsters having gone with the mist. They called it the Fern Island Incident, and it was the talk of the town for years to come. The police were called after dozens of people awoke from a shared dream about being killed at a carnival that had been taking place there. They all talked about pumpkin-headed vandals, a giant corn creature, and a man in a long coat with terrible whistles. They all talked about a carnival barker, but not as often. All of them were weak, disoriented, and not quite sure what had happened. The hospital that treated the majority of them labeled the incident as a incident of group hysteria, but they couldn't find a cause. There were some patients with alcohol in their system, but not enough to have made them hallucinate. There were some patients with drugs in their system, but nothing harder than one man who had snorted a little cocaine. The truth was that no one knew why they were like this. No one but 4 18-year-olds who did not go to the hospital and did not talk to the police. They slunk off like thieves in the night, aware that they had witnessed something unexplainable. "Well," Mark said as he drove them home, "no one's ever going to believe this." "Who cares?" Mary said. "We believe it. That's enough for me." Jazzy sat in the back seat with Reggie, who was snoring. He had made it to the car with the help of all three of them and had collapsed in the back seat before crashing out. She noticed Mark glancing at him in the rearview mirror, and she could see real worry there. It made her glad. Mark was such a good friend to worry about him. "I'll stay with him tonight," Jazzy said. "I'll tell his parents that something happened and he's not feeling well." "Good idea," Mark said. He sounded strange, though, as he said it. It was something they would talk about over the years, their harrowing time on Fern Island, and it kept them close. Though they drifted some in the years after high school, the four always came back together at least once a year for scary movies, candy, and remembrance of a night when they had been very, very lucky.